We are excited to officially welcome you to the Juniper Summit 2024. Okay, and so here to officially welcome us to the Juniper Summit, we have Eric Cornell, who's a JILA Fellow and former director of the JILA Physics Frontier Center, who is hosting, sponsoring this event. So Eric is an AMO experimentalist. You may know his work, achieving the first Bose-Einstein condensate, for which he won the 2001 Nobel Prize in Physics. In addition to his success as an experimentalist, Eric has long been a champion for informal physics education and public engagement, particularly here at JILA, partnering with and overseeing and advocating for our PISEC program here at JILA. So I'll hand it over to Eric to officially welcome us.
It is definitely not a summit, it's definitely not a workshop without an extremely brief speech of welcome from some local person. That would be me. I think this is a really terrific idea. I'm here basically on behalf of the JILA Physics Frontier Center. I'm on the executive committee. The Physics Frontier Center here at JILA, and I in particular have long been very, very enthusiastic about informal science education. I think it's super important for promoting engagement, for promoting participation, inclusiveness, and all sorts of other things in science. And I guess I don't really have to convince you folks about this, but I, for one, am also convinced. I was just recently out in the Boston area and happened to stop by the Museum of Science there, which is a sort of a touchstone from my childhood. I mean, I remember going to this museum and didn't think of myself as being informally educated at the time, but I guess I was. And I just had little brief flashbacks of pleasure from being there after all these years. And it still sort of has a sort of association of like, science is a fun thing, it's a good thing. And it kind of remained imprinted for years. I think this network is a spectacularly good idea, and having a summit is another really good idea. So I wish you very, very good luck in your activities over the next couple of days. It sounds like a lot of fun to me. And thanks for coming out to Boulder to see us.
All right, thanks, Eric. So Ali and I are going to kick us off to dig into our discussions for the summit, but we want to start. Forgot to tell the organizers that you're going to introduce yourselves. We want to start by having all the organizers introduce themselves. So I'll go first. I'm Jessica Hain. Pronouns are she, her. I am the Director of Public Engagement and Education Research for the JILA Physics Frontier Center. And as part of that, I run our PISEC program, and really excited to be here with everyone. Hi, everyone. I'm Ali Law. I use the pronouns she, her, hers. I work at the American Physical Society. I am a senior program manager of public engagement there, and have the pleasure of working with a great team, and many of you here are involved in our programs. And I am the Juniper community manager as well. I'll hand it over to Mike.
Do we need that? You can either go up or hold this.
I'll just go up. I'll make it as awkward as possible. Hello, I'm Mike Bennett. I'm currently at QSense, which is a quantum information science center that's sort of headquartered here. But I have a long history of informal physics education participation, including with the Physics Frontier Center, similar to Jessica. I am was on board when Juniper was just kicking up, and currently, I guess, serving as an advisory member, as it were. So.
Hi everybody, Claudia Fracchiola here. I am currently the head of public engagement at the American Physical Society, and I guess kind of one of the founders of Juniper and the idea of a community of practice around informal physics education research. So I'm really, really excited to see these happen. It's been a long dream coming. So.
Good morning, friends. It's so good to see you here. And I have so much to say, and I'll try not to say it with all that. But a couple things I want to recognize. So I'm Noah Finkelstein, he, him. I'm a professor here in the physics department. I'm really grateful for the collaborations that we have. I want to honor that we're partly in a space that has an incredible legacy of commitment to engaging with the public. Probably most notoriously is that we had the pleasure, well, I didn't have the pleasure, but we as an institution had the pleasure of having Frank Oppenheimer, Robert's brother, as a faculty member here early on, and he got so jazzed about the opportunity to engage people in physics through experiment and play that he left here and decided to merge his passion of art and science, or physics, by starting the Exploratorium in San Francisco. So not a bad legacy, in fact. And so we, as Colorado, of course, then threw out all of his great experiment equipment following that. But we get to follow collectively in those footsteps, not throwing things out, but building on all of that. And I'm also very proud to be the legacy of a child who's brought into science through these informal programs, which I'll happily tell you about over happy hour sometime.
Hi, I'm Katie Hinko, and I'm a professor at Michigan State University. And a long time ago, I used to work here with PySec and with Noah and everybody else. And I'm just like genuinely thrilled to meet everyone and talk to you all. And I think the cool diversity of perspectives and different experiences that we all have is just going to really make it a really great day and a half to build our ideas and create something together. So hooray, hooray. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, everyone. We've got a good team. So also just want to thank a few people for making this event happen. Krista Beck has been coordinating all of our food. Hannah Douglas has been helping with that. So if you see Krista or Hannah around, thank them. They've been doing a lot of work. Scott and George helped us set up the room. And then of course, JR is here helping us record our talks. We're currently recording our talks, by the way, so that we can share them with the broader Juniper community afterwards. So thank you, JR, for all of your help. And one thing I forgot to mention in the logistical thing at the beginning, we do have power strips scattered around the room if you need to plug in your computer. So look around if you need one. And then lastly, huge thank you to the Jilla Physics Frontier Center, who's sponsoring this event in collaboration with the American Physical Society. Special shout out to the directors, Anna Maria Ray and Andreas Becker, as well as Eric Cornell, who we just heard from, and Heather Lewandowski, who are all instrumental in getting us the support to put on this event. So thank you to them. So the summit is sponsored by the Jilla PFC and APS with additional support from the CU Office for Research and Innovation and the CU Boulder Center for STEM Learning. And with that, I think we can jump into talking about informal physics. Thanks, Jessica. So if you have been to any previous Juniper event, you always know that I start with terminology because we don't have a common language for the terms we use to refer to, I think, a lot of similar work. So you'll hear us say informal physics education, which we have acronymed IPE, and public engagement, PE. Well, you'll hear us use those terms a lot during the summit and pretty synonymously. I apologize, the acronyms, the P and the E stand for different things in each acronym. But all of this refers to the types of physics education activities that occur outside the formal classroom or formal education structures. And so it can refer to a wide range of activities where facilitators and participants are mutually engaged in exploring physics phenomena, and really the emphasis is curiosity and excitement over content mastery. Certainly content can be learned through informal spaces, but that's not often the main goal. Examples of this include things like science camps, star parties, planetarium shows, after-school programs, museum exhibits, science podcasts, and many others. So there's a lot of different types of activities that fall under the terms informal physics education and public engagement with physics. Another similar term that you might use is outreach. In this summit, you'll hear us use the terms informal physics education and public engagement more than outreach. Not that outreach is a bad term, it's just traditionally outreach has been a model of one-way interaction, often with an expert sharing information, telling information to audience members. There's often a power structure that's implied, and we think that informal physics education and public engagement better encompass the type of work we do in terms of mutually engaging with our audiences, exploring phenomena together, and so you'll hear us use those two terms. Again, you're welcome to use the term outreach, but that's why we use IPE and PE, and why it's in the acronym of Juniper. I should also say, I know that there are a range of backgrounds in this room, and so we, the organizers, and Juniper itself is focused on physics engagement, but we know that we have collaborators and people in this community that have different disciplinary backgrounds. We welcome that. We know that we can learn from everybody's background here, and we also know that what we'll be discussing here is not a unique problem to physics engagement. It also is challenges and such that are faced by other disciplines of STEM. So all of your voices are welcome here. And what is Juniper? So it stands for the Joint Network for Informal Physics Education and Research, and we're a community of practice for people who design, facilitate, or study informal learning activities and programs. And we formed Juniper to help promote connection, collaboration, and learning around effective ways to engage with the public on physics topics. And so we have our mission is empowering our members, our community, to support, to enact research-based, culturally responsive, and equity-oriented practices in public engagement, with the vision that we will help establish public engagement as a recognized and valued practice of physicists. And we'll be talking a lot about that over the next day and a half. And so even though we're here today, or Juniper has a history, and this is just an abridged history, but when we as a team were thinking about, well, where did Juniper, where's the conception of the idea, where did we really start to think about this, and I'm using a royal we for all of our organizers here, we dated it back to 2017, although there certainly was work done before then. But in 2017, Katie and Claudia here had NSF funding to start studying the informal physics education research landscape and started conceptualizing the idea of an IPER community. What would that look like? And then in 2018, this moved into a workshop that they designed, as well as some of our other organizers here, for how to engage with the public and design public engagement programs. And then that was also followed by a kind of listening session at the Summer American Association of Physics Teachers Conference that year, which then led to the formation of a website and community listserv for the informal physics education research community, and then culminated also in 2019 in hosting the Physics Education Research Conference, which happens every summer, focused on informal physics education research. We know what happened in 2020, but jump forward a little bit. So between 2021 and 2022, we started formalizing this idea, formalizing the community part of the idea of an informal physics education community into Juniper. So we started applying for funding, getting rejected for funding, applying again for funding, getting rejected for funding, but yeah, keep going. But we're very lucky to have support of the American Physical Society, where Claudia and I landed, to help kind of launch some of this work, as well as obviously the labor of all of our community members. And we formally launched Juniper as Juniper in the fall of 2022. And this, we have monthly events, and we've had monthly events since 2022 till today. So every month we hear from members of our community presenting on their public engagement work. A number of you in this room today have presented there. We've also have workshops, we have run conference sessions, we have run and the summit today. So we're really excited. This is, I think, our biggest in-person event that we have done. So we're really glad that you all are here. So I said that Juniper is a community of practice. if you're unfamiliar with that concept, a community of practice is a group of people who share a concern or passion or interest in something, and they are learning how to do that thing better as they interact regularly. So your neighborhood is a community, but it might not be a community of practice because you're not really necessarily sharing the same passion or interest around something that you're all trying to get better or learn more about. So communities of practice have shared experiences and ways of interacting. They have, they learn together, they have these common interests, and you also can develop an identity as a member of that community of practice as well. There are many ways to participate in a community of practice, from more peripheral to more central. All of those are legitimate ways to participate, and it might change in time. So you might be really central to a community of practice at one time, and then you float back to more peripheral, and then float back to more core. So for Juniper, we think of the who of the community of practice as you all. So people who are educators, researchers, public engagement practitioners, science communicators, students. These all overlap with each other, and they're just not an exhaustive list. The what of Juniper, that's our mission we said earlier, right? Empowering and supporting each other as we learn the best ways to engage with our local publics, and making sure we're doing so in an inclusive, research-based way. And so how do we do this? As I said, we have these monthly coffee hours, we have workshops, this kind of session now. We have a science communication fellowship program we were piloting this past year, so lots of different ways we're trying to help the community learn around public engagement together. And this is just examples of some of that. So a screenshot of just a snippet of some of our coffee hours, which are all on the APS YouTube channel. So if you need something to watch tonight, go on YouTube, watch that. This is a picture from our session at the APS April meeting last year. Again, we have some familiar faces that were also presented at that session. We've taken people through making a logic model for their program, public engagement program, in the workshops we've run. And I want to importantly say that the summit is happening in response to you all, in response to community interest and request of having an in-person gathering to really focus on discussing public engagement. How can we support that in physics? So thank you all for suggesting it, and we're really happy to be able to bring it to you all today. All right, so we want to think a little bit about where does IPE or PE live in the landscape of the physics discipline. So Ali was just talking about Juniper as a community of practice, but let's zoom out a little bit and think of the physics discipline as a community of practice. So we're going to be talking about like different levels of communities of practice. So if we think of the physics discipline as a community of practice, we have, so Ali was mentioning there's different roles and different ways to participate in a community, including like the insider core members who are like leaders of the field. These are going to be often senior or established physics professors, senior scientists, and so on. We have inbound members. So these are people who are moving towards the core membership. So this would be like early career folks, postdocs, grad students, undergrad majors. These are people who are part of the community and who are like moving towards the center. Neutral members of the community might be students who are taking our physics classes but not majoring in physics, stakeholders from adjacent fields. And then out on the periphery is where we put informal physics educators, researchers, and practitioners. And why do we put us there, informal physics? So just a few examples. You might have noticed that informal physics sessions at conferences are often not placed in prime schedule slots. They sometimes overlap with other highly attended events. I know from my personal experience, and probably many of you do, that it is common or can be common for students to engage in informal physics activities without telling their advisors due to perceived lack of faculty support for such activities or lack of value. People leading PE activities are often students or part-time staff as opposed to faculty, sort of positioning it as a side activity of departments. IPE and PE is usually not included in evaluation criteria for tenure and promotion. Does anyone else have other examples of why you see, just real briefly, why or how you see informal physics education being positioned on the periphery of the physics discipline?
People think it's not physics.
People think it's not physics, yeah.
Yeah. Even more, it's like a waste of time, like it's like anti-physics.
Right. Yeah, it's like a waste of time. It takes away from like
I love the
real physics.
implication that physics is the stuff of time.
Yeah. Were you gonna say something back there, Heather?
It's just play.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
not doing real science.
Right. So kind of similar. It's not real science. Yeah. Any other thoughts? No.
Many thoughts, obviously. But just back to the language, and thank you starting with language, Ali. I think this is hugely important for us because language is defining of culture, and this is what we're talking about here. And so the language that's used is that of outreach. And outreach is something that you do that literally sits on the fringes of where you are at, and broadcasting, hierarchical, comes with all kinds of loaded implications with that. One of which is it sits on the fringes of what it is that you're about. The central stuff is then what you broadcast.
Yeah. And maybe oh yeah, Claudia.
Well, and I'm already gonna say on the last point that you have there, it's not that it's not included, is that it can then see as detrimental
Right.
for your tenure or career path.
Like you're spending too much time on public engagement and not enough on other stuff. Yeah.
Shannon.
Yeah, Shannon.
In the funding structures, it's an addendum, it's like a little add-on, it's not the main, it's like the broader impact or this, DOE's equivalent, so that it's sort of an afterthought.
Yeah. So if you couldn't hear what Shannon said, it's sort of an add-on in funding structures. So like broader impacts is kind of like an ad hoc thing that gets added on. And maybe you want to. Oh yeah.
Yeah, in tenure and promotion, even if you do get funding, it's not really counted or counted with resistance.
Sure. Yeah, that's really interesting. Ed?
Well, to answer the question you didn't ask though, I think like the fact that APS, funds staff positions that involve this work, that's something, right? That's not nothing. So I think there's some countervailing trends. maybe.
Yes. Thank you for bringing us back to the positive. We didn't want to stay in the negative for too long, but I felt like it was important to acknowledge there are definitely outliers and exemplars and places where IPE is on the inside. Yeah, Hillary.
Yeah, I wanted to add to the positive. It can be on the periphery because it's bringing people in too. So we've got the outbound, but we also have inbound coming in through that periphery.
Sure.
And that, like, I don't know if you guys saw the study that came out recently where they did a survey and it was like 70% of physics bachelor's degrees. Like, it said one of the things that led them into getting a physics bachelor was an informal experience. 70%, that was more than anything else. So like there's some inbound here too.
Yes,
Like,
yes.
I will share that on the Slack, so that it's an AIP report that came out, and that was particularly for marginalized communities in those fields. But the problem is that even though that's true, and that's research that has been proven multiple times, right? Still, institutions, organizations do not recognize that that's the work that we do.
No.
I just want to build on that comment because it's so important, and credit actually Elaine Seymour. Many of you may know of her work talking about leaving. She was here for full term. Said that's how change happens, is from the periphery, sitting in its bridge from the outside to the inside, which maybe is a segue here where we're headed, which is it's an opportunity. By working at the periphery, it's a way for you to cause change within the central core, which otherwise does not have impetus or incentive to change, whether that's who participates, what the nature is of culture, what's valued, or at less stage.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I think that's really important, that our position on the periphery is important and we can bring people into the community. There are also exemplars of departments and programs and labs where public engagement informal is really central to the practices, and many of you represent those exemplars, so we're excited to hear from you and learn from you and think about what that could look like on a broader scale. One other note about kind of public engagement work being on the periphery, we can look at the 2022 APS member survey on public engagement. The results are here. Someone will also post them in the Slack channel. But there were a number of challenges that members reported in terms of their public engagement activities. So only 40% of respondents reported that they had access to financial resources that they needed to facilitate public engagement efforts. 42% reported access to training in public engagement skills, and 48% of people said they would need more time to do public engagement. So we see a lot of these challenges that are really prevalent in terms of lack of recognition, resources, time, training, and so on. Okay, so coming back to the physics discipline, thinking about like what is considered core practices of the physics discipline. Can anyone shout out, what do you think are the core practices of physicists? Research? Experiment?
Exploring phenomena.
HBAR, exploring phenomena. Yeah. Teaching? Yes. Publishing? Grants? Community? What do you mean by that?
If there was only one physicist in the world, it wouldn't exist.
That's true. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so these are all awesome. These are aligned with many of the things we came up with. So some of the core practices of physicists are definitely doing research, mentorship and teaching, communication to scientists, so publishing, giving talks at conferences and so on, collaboration, so that gets to the community idea, maybe communication to the public, debatable, maybe in some places that's a core practice of physicists. And we, as we have kind of acknowledged, public engagement practices are kind of out here on the periphery. So the purpose of this summit, we have gathered you all here for a day and a half to develop a vision and a strategy for transforming the core disciplinary of practices in physics to include public engagement and informal physics education. So we are trying to move PE to the core practices of physics. So this is really our call to action for you all. We have the opportunity to collectively determine concrete steps for really moving our field into the core of physics. So what we're talking about here is a culture shift. How can we shift the culture of physics to be inclusive of public engagement and informal physics education research as part of the core practices of our discipline? And I think I'm handing it over to Allie now.
So we're gonna have time to dig into this question over the next day and a half, but we wanna forecast or preview that how are we gonna be documenting all the great ideas that come out of the discussions. We're gonna do so, one of the ways we're going to do so is through a white paper that we'll all be contributing to. All of the discussions that we've scheduled over the summit are gonna feed into sections of that paper, and you all are welcome to be authors on the paper, so anybody who would like to have authorship can have authorship. We'll have more details about that later. But we have identified and structured the conversations of the summit around 4 themes. So we're going to be talking about structures and organization needed to support this culture shift of moving public engagement more into a core practice of physicists. We're going to be talking about community partnerships, stakeholder engagement, so how do we get buy-in from various stakeholders, and also how do we leverage research on best practices, on the impacts of public engagement and such to advocate for public engagement. I'll say you all, as Jessica said, in your folders have very much draft outline of what we think this paper, the sections of this paper might look like, and it's also on the link tree, but we are very open to changing what's in there, to adding, to reorganizing, to modifying. So as we're having discussions, if you think, hey, actually, I think we maybe need to add something to this paper or rearrange things, make notes of that. We're gonna have a whole session tomorrow to really dig into that. So we wanted you to have access to it now, but also we're want this to be very responsive to the conversations that we have. So we have a very tentative kind of outline there. It can change. It's definitely not set in stone. Okay, so with that, we want to start collecting your ideas. So we have a Slido poll, so if you scan this QR code or go to this tiny URL, which I think maybe we can also drop in the Slack channel, you will come up to a poll that is asking you, what does it mean to you for informal physics education or public engagement to be core to the discipline of physics? And I ask that you try to think of short phrases, 1 to 3 words, because it's gonna make a word cloud, so please don't try long sentences. But short phrases, you can submit as many short phrases as you'd like. But what does it mean to you? What would it look like to you for public engagement or informal physics education to be core to the physics discipline? So go ahead, take a moment to think about that, submit some responses. Funded, recognition, belonging, respected, seen as part of the job, it's sustainable, research-based, fewer barriers, time, presumably I have time to do it, maybe. This is all great. I think this is in line with some of the thoughts that we brainstormed ahead of time, in terms of, like, we might add the word, and I'm not sure if it's there, but visibility. So that goes with not hiding. And I think definitely we also had talked about, as an organizer team, recognition for this work as well. So thank you for contributing. We're gonna now be able to dig into this even more.